Hey folks, welcome to another tutorial. It's Temi here, and today we are doing a deep dive into Riverpod, and we're going to be looking at Riverpod as a state management solution for your Flutter apps. And we are going to go and look into all the providers that Riverpod has and which scenario to use all these Riverpod providers. And we have a really simple sample app here, and I've listed all the providers, and I'm going to go and explain every bit of it with sample examples. But we really have a simple UI setup here, and for this app I'm using a package called Flex Color Scheme by Mike, and it sort of gives you beautiful color scheme out of the box that you can use, so you can check it out as well. And what we have here is a simple setup where I have the home page, and on the home page I have a little button here which I created, which is called button, and it just links to different pages of provider page, state provider page, feature provider page, and all the stuff. So we are going to go deep dive into each and every of this and see when you should use it in your Flutter apps and the scenarios why you should use either state notifier, change notifier, stream provider, and the likes. So let's get started. Before we continue, it's important to let you know that Riverpod is not just a state management framework. In fact, it's a reactive caching and data binding framework. What it means is that you want to catch your data and you want to bind that data with your UI, sort of. And so you have an object that you have, and you can provide that anywhere in your app. So it's just beyond a state management framework. So with that, we can start. And the first thing we need to do with the Riverpod package to use in an app is to go to the docs, and then there is a Flutter Riverpod package here. So we are going to go to that, and then we need to install Flutter Riverpod 2.0.2. That is at the version when I was recording this video. So we are going to add that in our prospect.yaml file, and that will install Riverpod for us. And the next thing is go down a bit. We need to wrap our main file, a main.dart, in a provider scope. So if you go down, you may be able to see it. So here is it. So you need to wrap your my app after just the run app in provider scope. So let's go ahead and do that. And here, so we are going to wrap it in a new widget, and then we are going to give it provider scope. Yeah, and then we are good to go. So we are going to just look at every bit of concept in Riverpod. So let's say you want to have a value accessible throughout your app, and you're thinking how you can do that with Riverpod. You want to use a provider. So let's go to the provider page.dart here. And then what we want to do at the top of our file here is to create a provider. We want to provide a value, and we can say value provider equals to provider. Yeah. And then you can annotate what you want to provide here. So let's say we want to provide an integer, and we now import Riverpod here. Now you can see we have created a simple provider here, and anytime we call a value provider, it will always return 42 for us. So if you look at ref is simply a provider reference, And we are going to look at it in more details in this video, because Rev gives you some capability that you would need in future. So, but for now, if you want to really provide a value throughout your app, you just need to create a provider and give it a type, and then you give it the value it's going to return. Now, this is not going to stop here, because you need to let your widget know about this provider. So how do you let your widget know about that provider? To make this provider available in your widget, we say we want to read the value provider. And look at it now. The value provider is simply a read-only value. You can't modify this. So, so let's provide this provider. Let's read that in our provider page. So let's go ahead and say we have a body. So there are two ways. You can actually use the consumer widget here, and it has a builder. So let's let the autocomplete gives us. So it's requiring a builder. And then a builder has a widget ref. This is ref. This ref allows us to read a provider. So you can simply return, let's say we are returning a value here. And look at what it has given us here. And we have a widget ref which allows us to read a provider. So now with this ref, we can simply say ref.watch, and we are watching a value provider here. And when I save that and I click on provider here, we should be able to see. So there's a problem here. Bad state, no provider scope found. And we simply just need to restart our app to be able to see a provider scope. And when we click on it, you see the value is 42. If I change the provider here and then I refresh, I click on provider again, it's 50. So it's basically just provide you a read-only value throughout your app. So you can do that anywhere here in other pages, and it's going to give you the same results. Another way you can watch a provider in a widget is to extend a consumer widget instead. And when you extend the consumer widget, you have to provide another param here, which is widget ref. Widget ref allows your widget to interact with providers. So you have access to a whole lot of methods like read, watch, invalidate, and the likes. Okay, so how do you now use it? So I'm going to comment this consumer widget out, and I'm going to just pick this and just comment this out and put this instead. And now you say we have the value to be 50. Let's wrap this in the center and we are good to go. It's the same thing. So you see we have access to our value provider now. Now remember that this provider is read-only. So if you want to change the state of this value here, which provider are you going to use? So that brings us to a state provider, which you can modify the state of your provider. To do that, we just need to, let's copy this, and then we go to state provider screen, and let's find that here. Okay, and we will do almost same, but this time I'm going to rename the provider to value state provider, and here instead I'm going to give it a state provider, and then you import that from Riverpod. What this does is that you can modify the states of this provider. So how do you do that? Let's convert this to a consumer widget, and then give it widget ref here. So we have, so let's say we want to watch the provider. We watch the provider here like this. Remember that watching means you want to get the value from the provider. So we are going to be doing the same. and here. Exactly. So we have value is 50 from here. So let's say we have, let's modify this a bit. Let's say we have a column here, and then we have a button. Let's have a size box, and then we have a button. Okay, so let's say we want to change the value on this state notifier. We want to, each time we press the button, it increases. And we just have to do ref.read. So what does read gives us? Read a provider without listening to it. So if you want to see the value, you use watch. If you want to read, and you should use read in like your unpressed when you do an action, when you do an event. To avoid side effects, you shouldn't do that outside your return here. You shouldn't do that. You should do that in when you do an event, when you click a button and the like. So let's provide the provider here, and then we give it here. So when you want to change the state, you need to call a method called Notifier here. So when you do the Notifier, let's go inside it a bit. We don't have a doc, but what it does is it basically notifies this provider that, oh, we want to change your state. We are notifying you that we want to do stuff. And then we can change the state here. So what we want to do is that we want to increment the value of our state provider by 1 each time we click on a button. So let's click, and it's good. We are good to go. Now, let's say we have incremented this value here, and then we want to reset to like 50. How do we do that? So we can easily do that. Let's have another button by using a method called invalidate. So the text is going to read invalidate here like this. And then instead of doing ref.read, we are going to remove this .notifier. Instead of doing ref.read, there's a method called invalidate. And what this does is the refreshes the state of your provider basically. So let's do that and invalidate. So let's say you don't want to click a button like we have done here that resets it back to 50. You want to do that when you pop up the screen. You can easily add an auto dispose here. So these automatically disposes your provider when you leave the page. So let's save this. I'm going to give you an error, so let's just restart and go back to state provider. So let's increment, and then when we pop the screen and come back to it, it's reset to 50, which makes sense. So let's remove this auto dispose and we try it again if it actually does that. Let's increase, go back, say it's still 64. So auto dispose helps you to automatically dispose the provider when it's not used by the screen anymore. So let's say you want to perform some action based on provider state changes. There's something called ref.listen that you can use. And this allows you to listen to your provider right out of the box. And so let's work with this. And let's annotate it by giving it an int because our state provider is of type int. So it gives us 2 arguments here, previous and current. And then we can print something like this. Okay, so this is really good if you want to show snack bars, you want to show dialogues and the likes. But then we need to pass in our provider here, which is our value state provider. So we can do some checks and we can say if our current let's say when our counter gets to 55, it's show a snack bar. Okay, so we are showing a snack bar here. So let's test this. Let's invalidate and then we increment till we get to 65. You see, value is 65, which is good. So you use your ref.listen when you want to respond to state changes and you want to show your custom navigation. You want to do some navigation, you want to do some snap bars, you want to show some dialog bars. It's good. And it won't be called when your build method is called. So it's going to ignore it. It's only going to be called when your state changes has happened. So it's not going to cause some side effects for you. Next on our list is the feature provider. So we are going to go to the feature provider page here. And yeah, so we use a feature provider if you have some feature that you want to listen to. So the feature provider comes out of the box that helps you undo feature provider. It looks like the feature builder widget, but you will see how to use this. So I'm going to create a new folder called services here, and I'm going to say API service .dart because we want to create a simple API, and we are going to say API service like this. And then I have created a model here, suggestion. And what we are trying to do is to use an API called board activity. So anytime you call this endpoint, it's going to return an activity for you that you can do when you are bored. And we are going to use a package called Duo. Duo is used for HTTP calls. So we go to our prospect.yaml file and then we install Duo. So I'm going to copy it here and install Duo here. And we get that installed. Now we are going to create a method that sort of returns suggestion. That's the model. And we will say get suggestion. And it's going to be async. Okay, so let's see how to use Duo. And if you do a try catch, you just call away Duo.get. So let's do a try catch. And then we do final response equals to await Duo.get. Okay, so our endpoint is this. So we are going to just put it here like this. So we can say, so it's going to return, and let's just print E here. So what we've done here is that it's going to return suggestion.from JSON, which we have in a suggestion model. What it does is just let us decode this. So we pass in JSON decode and pass in the rest of data here. Now this is given. Okay, so let's just throw an exception like this. And so we have an API service. Now, remember that I told you if you want to provide, if you want to sort of provide some data, you can use a provider. So let's create a provider and say API service provider. And then it's going to provide us with API service here. You can see, because we are going to be needing that when we create a feature provider. Okay, so let's go back to our feature provider page. Now next thing is to create a provider here and say, what should we call it? We can call it suggestion feature provider, something like this, and it's going to look like this. Okay, So we are going to import the feature provider from Riverpod. We are also going to import the suggestion model. And then look at what we are doing here. We say final API service equals to ref.watch. We are going to watch our API service provider that we have provided in API service here. And then once we watch it, we're just going to return get suggestion, because get suggestion is a feature. So now that we have this, we can then convert this to a consumer widget and then pass in widget ref that let us access suggestion feature provider. And now let's have a body, and then let's have a center, and then we have a child. Okay, so at the top here, what I want to do is to do suggestion ref equals to ref.watch. So I want to watch suggestion feature provider because I want to be able to watch the value of our feature. Now, if I want to use this, I have to do suggestion ref dot. Now, there are some data here that I need. And how do I do that? I use this when method. So when allows you out of the box, gives you an async value. For example, when you do ref.watch, what you get is an async value of type suggestion. So what it means is that you have access to data, error, loading. So you can undo the states, these states when a feature provider is loading. Also when there's an error. So this is where the data is going to go. And I can do like this. Also for the error is going to have a of type error and stack trace. So you can have error. I don't need the stack trace for now, so I can just put an underscore. And for the loading, you don't need anything for the loading. So I'm just going to return a circular progress indicator here. Now for the, if there is an error, I want to return the error itself. And then when there's a data, I'm going to return a text, which is of activity, you see? It's already working. So let's try it again. Error getting suggestion. Now you remember where that error is. So that means that there's an error from a feature provider. So you can see that it's going to return the text from here. So let's fix this and let's put a breakpoint here. And then when I click on it, I should be able to see the error. So it's saying that internal link dash map is not a subtype of string. So how do we do to fix that? Let's remove this JSON decode for now because I think we are getting a map. And let's try again. And yeah, we have our answer here. So this is how to use your feature provider. Just use your .when, and you have access to data, you have access to error and the loading. There are some other data in your async value as well, so you can go deeper and find them out. You've noticed that each time we click on a feature provider here, it returns a new code for us, a new thing to do, a new activity for us. Let's see, but we have to go out and come in each time. But what if we want to pull to refresh, and it's going to give us a new activity to do? So let's do that. Let's say we wrap our center with a new widget called refresh indicator, but then we have to give it an on refresh. Yeah, so how do we refresh a feature provider? There is a method called refresh here that refreshes the state of your provider. We then pass in our suggestion feature provider here, and then you have an error, but then you have to add dot feature there to refresh. Now, one more thing before we continue, let's remove this sender. And then we wrap this in a list view. To do that, let's first wrap it in a column, and then we replace column with list view, like this, because refresh indicators only work with scrollable items. So if I refresh, and you see, it gives us a new activity to do each time we refresh. Let's start looking at stream provider, which is the next one. Okay, so I have created a service called stream service here, and it's going to return a stream, and it's going to return like an integer every second. And so the same way you use create a feature provider is the same way you do a stream provider. They're similar, just that this handles stream while feature provider handles features. So we are going to have stream service provider, and it's going to return stream service, same way we did for the API service. And that would mean we go to our stream provider page here, and then we create a provider that reads our stream service. So we have stream provider. We already have stream service provider, so stream provider. Let's say stream value provider. Let's name them properly. And then it's going to return a stream provider like this. And in here, we have ref. But then we will watch a stream service, and then we will return the stream service dot get stream. We need to import all this first, and then we have dot get stream. So we have a stream now. Okay, so how do we use that in our widget? We just convert this to a consumer widget, and then we do widget ref, and then we have a body which will return a center, same way we did, and then we have a child. So at the top here, I will have a value stream, okay, stream value, and we have stream value provider. So we do stream value dot, same way we have for a feature provider. So what this does is that it helps us, it returns an async value too, and allow us to undo when there's a data, when there's an error, and also when it's loading. So out of the box, we have all this. And we can easily, for the loading, I'm going to return a circular loading progress indicator. For the error, I'm going to return a text. And then here, I'm just going to return a text with the data. And as you can see, we have data here. And let's run it again. We don't have an auto dispose on this, so let's add an auto dispose so that when we pop out the screen and we come back, it will dispose the provider. So we are loading 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Let me add some style here so you can see it properly. Text style font size is, let's give it an 18 or 30 so you can see it properly. Okay, good. And let's pop out the screen, come back, 0, 1, 2, and it goes up like that. So the scenario in which you use a stream provider is when you're reading sockets or you are interacting with Firebase, and it's really good in those scenarios. So you want to watch some data from Firebase, stream provider is good for those scenarios. The next one is the change notifier provider. And let's look at the doc a little bit. So here is the doc for Riverpod, and you can see the URL here. But change notifier provider is a provider that listens to and exposes a change notifier from Flutter. So, but change notifier provider is discouraged by Riverpod. And the only reason is that you want to have a state that is immutable, that can be changed. So it is highly discouraged in Riverpod. But anyways, you should prefer using the state notifier provider instead. But we are going to look at it, and because it's important you know it. And of course, because you are probably going to use it in some navigation packages like Go Router if you want to do your route logic. So let's see how to implement change notifier provider in Riverpod. And so we have an example here. And when I click on it, it's really simple. I have a list of products here. And then as I add this product to a cart, I want this cart to increase. And then when I click on this cart, I see all the clicked carts and I can clear. So we want to implement this using change notifier provider. And then we will implement these two in a state notifier provider later. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go to the page where we have state notifier provider, and we have the UI like this. It just has a body with a list builder and a list of products. And then the action is here, that when I click on this one, it shows all the lists here. And of course, I have a model here, which is the product. And then I have a static variable here that returns the list of products that you're seeing here. So let's go ahead and implement. And so here, I'm going to create a folder called data. And in here, I'm going to say cart provider dot. And here, what I want to do is I'm going to create a class and I'm going to call it cart provider, and it's going to extend a change notifier. Change notifier is from the Flutter framework itself. Okay, so now you need to declare a list of products here, and it's going to be our product, and I'm going to make it an empty string, empty list, sorry, and let us import product here. We are going to set a getter for it. We don't need to make it final because we will modify it later. Okay, so let's now start adding our logic. So let's say we want to add a product. So when you click on this one, you should add your product to this list of products. And instead of products, let's call it cards. This is like our cards, and we have cards here. So I can add to a cart. By adding to a cart, I will add a product. What if I want to clear? If you want to remove a product, you can call cart.remove. It will remove the product there. And I want to clear the cart. And then it will clear all the list here. Okay. And which is good for us. So, and to use this, we need to create a provider, which is cart notifier provider. And instead of having state notifier, it's going to have a change notifier. And it's going to return like a list of products here. And then instead of calling this one cart provider, let's call it cart notifier. Makes sense because it's a notifier. And then we will import the cart notifier provider here. And what we need to do is it should only take in a cart notifier. We don't need to say it returns a list of notifiers. Okay, so yeah, so we are good to go. And remember that you are going to call change notifier provider, make it of type of your class that is extending change notifier, and then it's going to return the change notifier itself. And then we can go ahead and use that. So let's go to our UI here, which is our change notifier page. And then let's change this to a consumer widget because we need access to all our provider, that provider itself. So we have this widget ref, which is good. Now we want to do an unpressed, add the product to the cart. So we will have ref.read. What is the name of our provider? Cart notifier provider. And then we import that here. Remember that you have to add the notifier. And then you can do add product, which is going to add the product to our list like this. And so let's go up here in the cart here. Let's make sure that as we add the item, it is showing up here. So we are going to be watching the provider. So let's say cart notifier. We are going to be just watching cart notifier provider. So here we are going to say cart notifier dot cart. And here as well, cart notifier dot cart. And let's save that. Let's go back to our cart provider. One more thing, I want to rename this to cart notifier, which makes sense because that's the right name. And then let's sort of test out this as we are adding. Oh, we are missing something as well. I didn't save this. We are missing something. Let's go back to our change notifier page. We didn't show the total, or did we? We didn't. So in the total here, it will be our cart notifier dot cart, remove the const, and it's going to be to string. Okay. It's going to be dot length, and then it's to string, which makes a lot of sense. So we have 0. As we add, you can see It's already there. Okay, so you see you have a central place to add all your cards. And if you click on the cards, you see we have redshirt, and the total which we have done. Okay, we can also implement for clear here. And how to do that, we go to clear, and it's basically going to be ref.read card notifier provider dot notifier dot clear. Let's see the method itself, clear cut. That's the method. And if you do clear, let's try again. It sort of clears it here, but it hasn't cleared here because we are not making the alert dialog stateful. So for the state notifier provider, so let's go there. We need to implement this the same way we did for the change notifier, but instead we are going to use state notifier. So let's go to state notifier page. This is where we implement, but let's write the logic for cast state notifier, which is a file that I've created under data. Okay, so what we are going to do is to write a class card state notifier. It's going to extend a state notifier. And then this will be of type, we are going to do, and because we are handling a list of products basically. So let's import them like this. So card notifier wants you to supply, it's given an error because it wants you to invoke a constructor. And this is how we are going to do it. We are going to be using the super keyword here, but we are going to set the list of products here as empty. So that means the state is going to have an empty list of products. Now we have a method called add product here. So if you want to add a product, once you're passing a product here, instead of modifying the state directly, because you can't modify the state. But so what we are going to do is we are going to look through the state using the cascading operator here, and then we're going to add a product to it. So we are going to create a new list and set a state to it. If you want to remove a product, you are going to look for the state where this is equals to this, but we don't have the logic for remove product, so we are going to remove that. And then we have the cut here where we clear the cut, just setting it as empty. Okay, so let's go implement that in our UI. But first, we need to create the notifier like this. Card state notifier provider, the card state notifier, and then the type, which is a list of products. And we are going to just return this card state notifier here, as you can see. So it takes two arguments, the card state notifier and your list of products, which is good. So let's go ahead and go to the state notifier page screen. You know how we do? We are going to turn this to a consumer widget and then make this have an argument of ref, and then we can do card state notifier like this. So this one is a list of products. Now we can say, go here and say cards dot length, and then we can do to string, which is 0 here because the length of our cards is 0. Now let's have ref.read card notifier state notifier provider dot notifier, and we will have access to add product, and we are adding the product here, and we are good. So let's try that and see if our carts will increase. And there you go, it does. And we can also implement the clear cart, which we will do ref.read cart state notifier provider dot notifier and clear cart. And for the list of products, it will be cart.map cart.fold here, which calculates the cost of all the items in your cart. And then when we open the cart, you can see that's calculated all the items in a cart. And if you hit clear, this also clears. So we have talked about all the notifiers and providers in Riverpod. And the last thing we are going to talk about is modifiers in Riverpod. We have talked about one, which is the auto dispose modifier that we added to our feature provider. You can also add them on all your providers. For example, you can make this an auto dispose provider, which means that in your state notifier provider, let's reload. Anytime you modify the state and you pop out of the screen, it automatically disposes. So let's pop, you say this returns to 0. For your state notifier provider, if you add all your cards and you come back, you say it still has 8, which doesn't make sense. So what you can do to fix that is to also add your auto dispose modifier here, and you reload, and anytime you pop out of the screen, it will dispose the state. The second type of modifier is the family modifier. And let's say we are on our feature provider page here, and then in our API service, you want to pass in like an ID to this API, and then you do some string ID, for example. Now, how do you pass it if you are using a feature provider? Okay, how to do that is by using the family modifier. With the family modifier, you can tell which type of parameter that you want to pass. So this is a string, and then you will say, I want to pass in an ID or whatever, the variable you call it, and then you just pass it here. As you can see, very easy. And when you come here in your watch, you have to specify what it is that you're passing. You can say, I want to pass in 1. And this is going to pass this value to your suggestion feature provider and pass it down here. And then you can append that to your API URL. And the same thing here. You can just pass in 1, and it's going to do the refresh. So that's the other type of modifier that you have in Riverpod, and it comes really handy when you want to do stuff like this. So we have talked about all the types of notifiers and providers in Riverpod, and if you want more, you can go to the docs, which is still in progress, but you can see the version 2 docs here. Basically, everything is there. So we've talked about modifiers, we talked about how to read a provider. We've talked about all these providers. So that is basically what Riverpod is. And Riverpod is more powerful than this, actually. You can use it for your dependency injection, your service location, and a whole lot of stuff. So you can go over to the documentation here, and you can see a whole lot of scenarios where you can use it. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about code generation with Riverpod. So instead of having to write all these providers, you can just annotate your service and it's going to do the magic behind the screen. So watch out for that video. And this is where I'm going to stop this video. In the next one, I'm going to catch you. Make sure to like, subscribe, and put on the bell notification icon if you love this video. See you in the next one. Bye.